17 tiny coffins were discovered on Edinburgh's Arthur's Seat, and no one knows why. In 1836, a group of boys exploring the hillside stumbled across a hidden cave. Inside, they found a strange sight.
In the spring of 1836, a group of schoolchildren exploring the rugged slopes of Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh stumbled upon something mind-boggling. Even 2 centuries later, the discovery continues to baffle the world.
17 miniature wooden coffins, arranged in rows. Each one contained a small carved figure, carefully dressed in tiny handmade clothes.
Hidden in a shadowy cave, they found 17 miniature coffins, each no more than 3 or 4 inches long, meticulously carved from wood and containing tiny, lifelike human figures dressed in full funeral attire. Even today, the mystery of the 200-year-old miniature coffins found in Scotland still baffles experts. Today, we'll shed light on their story and possible origin. Let's get started. The miniature coffins. In 1836, these miniature coffins, 17 in total, came to light. Each is no longer than 3 to 4 inches, but each is astonishingly detailed, and each contains a tiny carved human figure. At first glance, they might have seemed like children's toys, but every element spoke of a precision and care that no child could achieve, and no ordinary toy maker would consider necessary. The coffins themselves were crafted from single blocks of wood, the lids separate but securely fastened with small wire sprigs or brass pins. Despite their size, every coffin bore a profusion of ornamentation. Tiny pieces of tin were carefully inserted into the wood, forming geometric patterns and decorative motifs that covered both lids and sides. It was the kind of meticulous, painstaking work that suggested not only patience, but an eye for symmetry, design, and delicate execution. These were not casual creations. They were objects of purpose and perhaps ritual, yet what that purpose was, we could not know, and it still remains shrouded in mystery. Inside each coffin lay a human figure, carved with faces so carefully rendered that the expression of each seemed deliberate. Some had serene features, some more solemn, and all were dressed from head to toe in cotton clothing, tiny robes, and caps that mimicked the funeral attire of the living. The sewing was painstaking, and even the smallest detail, such as buttons, collars, and hems, was replicated with care. The figures were miniature reflections of life and death, brought to scale. Researchers examining them note that the level of realism in the facial features and the clothing suggests not casual craftsmanship, but someone trained in precision work, someone who understood proportions, symmetry, and the human form. The craftsmanship alone has fueled decades of speculation. Scholars examining the coffins today believe that the figures were likely carved by a single artisan, while the coffins themselves may have been constructed by 1 or 2 others with comparable skill. The materials, wood, wire, tin, and a hooked carving knife, point to tradespeople accustomed to detailed handiwork. In particular, many researchers have suggested the coffins could have been fashioned by a shoemaker, a craftsman familiar with working with small pieces, leather, and delicate fittings, someone whose skills naturally translate to miniature construction. Today, only 8 of the original 17 coffins survive, carefully preserved at the National Museum of Scotland. They remain on permanent display, drawing visitors from around the world who marvel at their size, detail, and mystery. Each coffin carries with it a story that is only partially told, a fragment of a past steeped in history, death, craftsmanship, and enigma. Though they fit easily in the palm of a hand, their presence is imposing. Even today, researchers and visitors alike are drawn to their craftsmanship and haunted by the question, why were they made and for whom? The coffins, silent yet eloquent, keep their secrets. the enigma. Unlike toys or ordinary trinkets, these miniature coffins served no practical function. They were not playthings, not containers, not ceremonial vessels in any documented religious sense. And yet, someone, some unknown artisan, had devoted extraordinary skill and meticulous labor to create them. This enigma has fascinated historians, researchers, and amateur sleuths alike. Over the years, the coffins have sparked myths, legends, and speculation. Their small size belies the scale of the intrigue they provoke. Scholars have debated the origins and purpose of these objects for decades. Yet after nearly 190 years, there is no definitive answer. They remain a puzzle where every detail, the tin studs, the wire-fastened lids, and the carefully sewn cotton clothing, teases a story that refuses to be fully told. The most immediate questions that arise are deceptively simple. Why make miniature coffins at all? Why invest so much effort into carving human figures with realistic faces and dressing them in lifelike attire? Some researchers have speculated that the coffins were meant as symbolic burials, a way to honor individuals who, for one reason or another, had no proper grave. Others have suggested that they were designed to appease wandering spirits, a form of supernatural protection in a world still deeply entwined with superstition. In early 19th century Scotland, the line between folklore and daily life was thin, and belief in magic, curses, and spirits was widespread. Miniature coffins could have been a form of ritual, an offering, or a quiet attempt to intervene in the unseen world. Were they a secret, solitary act of grief, a public, ritualistic statement, or a blend of both, a private response to societal horrors and political upheaval? Their mystery persists because, unlike most historical artifacts, the coffins offer no inscriptions, no records, no explanatory notes. The creators left behind only the objects themselves, small, silent, and meticulously crafted, daring future generations to decode them. The best we can do is speculate about the possible explanations and historical context. Connection to Burke and Hare murders. In the dark, fog-drenched streets of 1820s Edinburgh, the city's pursuit of medical knowledge was advancing at a breathtaking pace. Its anatomy schools, particularly those linked to Dr. Robert Knox, were drawing students from across Europe, eager to study human anatomy firsthand. But this hunger for knowledge came with a grim cost. Cadavers were in short supply, graves were watched closely, and legal avenues to obtain bodies were limited. In this climate, body snatching, as in digging up recently buried corpses to sell to medical schools, became a lucrative, if illicit, trade. By the mid-1820s, Edinburgh was a city where the dead could not rest easily. Into this world stepped William Burke and William Hare, two Irish immigrants who would become infamous in the annals of crime. Between November 1827 and October 1828, Burke and Hare murdered at least 16 people, 12 of them women, and sold their corpses to Dr. Knox for dissection. Their victims were often the elderly, the poor, or those without families to mourn them. Burke and Hare would lure, substance, or strangle their victims, delivering fresh bodies that were more valuable than corpses. They operated with chilling efficiency. The press of the time immortalized them, with poems and rhymes warning children and neighbors of their deeds. Up the close and down the stair, Butt and Ben wi' Burke and Hare. Burke's the butcher, Hare's the thief, Knox the boy that buys the beef. The period of their killings is crucial when considering the mysterious miniature coffins discovered in 1836 near Arthur's Seat. Scholars have noted that the timing is striking. Burke and Hare's spree concluded just 8 years prior. Some researchers propose that the coffins were created as symbolic burials for the victims whose deaths had been violent, secretive, and anonymous. With the real graves of some of these victims likely unmarked or destroyed, miniature coffins could have served as a private memorial, a way to acknowledge lives that had been brutally cut short. The coffin's tiny size and intricate care suggest they were not meant for public display, but for a subtle, perhaps clandestine act of remembrance. Burke and Hare's murders took this trade to its horrifying extreme, and Dr. Robert Knox, who was both an anatomist and a public figure, profited from their actions, whether he was fully complicit or merely opportunistic. The coffin's existence in the 1830s.
By putting all of the pieces of evidence together, they were able to say these were probably made around 1830 or so, and that fits very neatly with the Burke and Hare period.
A few years after these murders may represent a reaction to this climate, a silent protest, a memorial, or a way to symbolically restore dignity to victims denied traditional funerals. The coffins were discovered in Edinburgh, the very city where Burke and Hare operated, not far from the anatomical schools hungry for corpses. The methodical care with which the coffins were made aligns with a society acutely aware of death, mourning, and the need to manage spirits and memory. While no records directly link the coffins to the murdered victims, the circumstantial evidence, the period immediately following the Burke and Hare murders, the location, and the attention to funerary detail makes it one of the most persistent and tantalizing theories about their purpose. Whether memorials, talismans, or something else entirely, they offer a tangible, haunting link to a time when death could be bought, sold, and manipulated, and when someone, somewhere, may have tried to reclaim a measure of dignity for the lost. But this is far from the only explanation. Commemoration of the Radical War of 1820. In the early months of 1820, Scotland was a nation simmering with unrest. The country had been hit hard by economic hardship, and calls for political reform were growing louder. Artisans, weavers, and working-class citizens of central Scotland organized a short-lived uprising known today as the Radical War, or sometimes the Scottish Insurrection of 1820. Its participants, known as the Radicals, sought greater political representation and economic relief. The rebellion began in March, centered around Glasgow, and spreading to surrounding towns, but it was swiftly and brutally crushed by government forces. By the end of the insurrection, at least 16 leaders had been executed, dozens more imprisoned, and the hope of reform was violently suppressed. It is into this turbulent historical backdrop that the miniature coffins discovered at Arthur's Seat in 1836 might be placed. Some historians, including Jeff Nisbet, have proposed that the coffins served as symbolic tributes to the fallen radicals. The coffins, measuring just 3 to 4 inches in length and containing intricately carved wooden figures dressed in cotton funeral attire, could have been crafted as a way to keep alive the memory of the dead, a miniature flame of rebellion preserved in wood and cloth. Unlike conventional memorials, these coffins were small, intimate, and almost secretive, perhaps meant for private remembrance rather than public display. Their careful construction, faces carved in detail, clothing sewn with precision, and lids decorated with tin studs suggests a labor of devotion, not merely an artistic whim. The timing and geography are telling. The Radical War had ended only 6 years before the coffins were discovered. Edinburgh, the city where the coffins were eventually found, was not far from the centers of radical activity, and it had been a city where political tension ran high. The coffin's small scale might indicate an effort to memorialize the dead discreetly, at a time when commemorating radicals could be politically dangerous. Public monuments to the Radical War did not exist, and overt acts of remembrance might have drawn suspicion or reprisal. In this sense, the coffins could be seen as an act of subversive memory, a private, painstakingly constructed homage to those whose deaths were politically inconvenient to celebrate openly. Jeff Nisbet, a Scottish historian and author who has studied both the Coffins and the Radical War, has emphasized this perspective. He suggests that the Coffins were designed to keep the flames of rebellion lit long after the insurrection was crushed. Each tiny coffin could represent a specific individual, or more broadly, the collective struggle of those who had dared to defy the authorities. The radicals, many of whom were executed in Glasgow, Stirling, and surrounding towns, had left few tangible markers behind. A miniature coffin, meticulously crafted, could serve as a surrogate grave, a silent testimony to lives lost and ideals suppressed. The craftsmanship of the coffins aligns with this interpretation. Scholars believe that the figures were carved by a single artisan, and that the coffins themselves were constructed by one or two other skilled individuals, possibly tradespeople such as shoemakers, who were accustomed to precise, small-scale work. The labor invested in each piece indicates more than casual interest. It suggests reverence and deliberate intent. However, the Radical War theory does not exclude other interpretations, and the coffin's exact purpose remains uncertain. Yet the possibility that they commemorate fallen radicals is compelling. It situates the coffins within a concrete historical moment, linking them to a defined political struggle, a violent suppression, and a community's effort to honor its dead despite the risks of doing so. But wait, there's more. Other theories and continuing mystery. The coffins have also been linked by some to witchcraft.
One of the Scotsman's theories was that they were something to do with witchcraft, because of course Arthur's Seat is an amazingly evocative place, and there were all sorts of stories about witchcraft and such like round about it.
Spiritual ritual or symbolic gestures meant to interact with the unseen world. In 19th century Scotland, folklore and fear of the unseen were woven into everyday life. This was a society that believed restless spirits could linger, that charms could protect homes, and that the dead, if improperly buried, might return in troubling ways. Protective magic was practiced quietly, often in secret, and rituals were rarely documented. Objects used for such purposes were hidden, personal, and symbolic, rather than public or decorative. One striking detail that fuels this interpretation is the deliberate concealment of the coffins in a remote crevice on Arthur's Seat. If their purpose had been memorial or artistic display, there would have been little reason to hide them so carefully. Instead, they were placed where few would ever see them, suggesting an act intended to work unseen. In Scottish folk tradition, rituals meant to control or placate spirits were often performed away from public view, in liminal spaces such as caves, hillsides, or crossroads. These places were believed to sit between worlds. Arthur's Seat itself, long associated with folklore and legend, would have been a fitting location for such a ritual act. The number of coffins, 17, has also attracted attention. While no definitive meaning can be attached to it, numerology played a role in folk belief, and repetition in ritual objects was often intentional. The fact that each coffin contains a figure, dressed and laid out as if prepared for burial, suggests a symbolic act of funerary completion. In cases where death occurred violently, anonymously, or without proper rites, folk belief held that the soul could become unsettled. Creating a symbolic burial, even in miniature form, was thought by some to offer peace to the spirit and protection to the living. The craftsmanship reinforces this interpretation. Each figure was carved with care, with faces given individual attention rather than crude or generic forms. The cotton clothing, sewn by hand, mirrors the real funeral attire of the period. In parts of Scotland and Ireland, objects such as corpse tokens or substitute burials were used when bodies were lost at sea or destroyed beyond recovery. While the miniature coffins are more elaborate than most known examples, the underlying logic is similar. The dead are acknowledged, symbolically laid to rest, and thereby prevented from causing harm or unrest. Another line of speculation links the coffins to the sea, a fitting connection for a nation shaped by maritime life. Some scholars and historians suggest that they may have been symbolic burials for men lost at sea or for individuals who died anonymously, without family or community to mourn them. In the early 1800s, maritime disasters, shipwrecks, and drownings were common, and the coffins could have served as tiny surrogate graves, a way to honor lives that had no proper funerals. Yet another possibility is that the coffins were created primarily as artistic or ceremonial objects. Scholars note that the precision and care evident in the carving and assembly of the coffins point to someone trained in meticulous handiwork, perhaps a shoemaker or artisan accustomed to small-scale detailed tasks. The tin studs, wire-fastened lids, and miniature sewn garments indicate labor and dedication far beyond what would be required for a casual project.
All of these miniature dolls that were inside of the coffins were very obviously modeled after humans. They all had swinging-like arms and were wearing like homemade clothing, with some of the fabric on the dolls dating back all the way to the 1830s.
If the coffins were intended as an exhibition of skill, they also suggest a human fascination with mortality, symbolism, and the tension between life and death, expressed through miniature form. What unites all these theories is the same frustrating reality. There is no concrete evidence explaining the coffin's creation. No documents, records, letters, or eyewitness accounts have ever surfaced to clarify who made them or why. The identities of the artisans, the motivations behind the work, and the intended recipients or observers remain unknown. This lack of verifiable data has allowed speculation to flourish for nearly 2 centuries, with historians, archaeologists, folklorists, and amateur enthusiasts all proposing theories grounded in history, psychology, or culture, but none proven definitively. The legacy of the coffins is as remarkable as their craftsmanship. Today, only 8 of the original 17 survive, preserved at the National Museum of Scotland. Scholars continue to study them, noting the minute attention to detail in the carving, the sewing, and the tin decorations. Visitors are captivated not only by the artistry, but by the profound human questions these tiny objects raise. Who were they meant to honor? Why were they hidden rather than displayed? Were they ritual, memorial, or purely artistic expression? These questions remain unanswered. The allure of the miniature coffins lies in their paradoxical nature. They are tiny, fragile, and unobtrusive, yet they provoke immense intrigue, speculation, and fascination. They encapsulate the intersection of artistry, death, ritual, and mystery, forcing anyone who studies them to confront the unknown. Every detail is a deliberate choice, hinting at intention but withholding certainty. The coffins are timeless, small enough to fit in the palm of a hand, yet enormous in the questions they raise about human behavior, grief, superstition, and the ways in which we remember the dead. Even without conclusive answers, the coffins have secured their place in history. They are discussed in books, documentaries, and exhibitions, a persistent enigma that continues to inspire imagination and scholarly debate alike. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.